So just going through all of like the zoning codes and reading them, a lot of them are difficult to understand and there's a lot of information there. So I think this project will be important just because we'll have an um, like graphic way of showing that information that's a lot easier to understand.
Well, I think there's a lot of ignorance out there about zoning, and people and politicians don't really have a clear idea of what their local zoning is or what it does, and hopefully our atlas will clear up some of those misconceptions.
So I think with zoning, there's a real lack of standardization, and I think the project will help there to be a lot more knowledge about what zoning is and what it does. And a lot of towns do things where they might think that they can just have it say, build it in the next town over, but the next town over does the same thing, so nothing gets built. I think the project will really help towns to be able to see what they're doing.
It's clear that the need for better housing and more housing in New Hampshire is widely acknowledged, but I think a lot of communities don't want it to be in their specific community or aren't aware of how difficult it is to build housing in other communities. By creating a zoning atlas and having all of the information on zoning collated, it will make it clear what the zoning restrictions are in different areas and make it harder for each community to shift off the housing responsibility onto some vague other community.
I think it's really meaningful just because zoning as an idea isn't really that well known among a lot of people. Like people don't really know what their town zoning is, how that compares to other towns. And so this project really is going to be able to make people more aware of those things, and able to be more politically active in their communities.
The most important reason is to provide people with housing that's affordable, particularly for people who um, are of lower income status, and it makes life better for them to live in a certain place. Um, and sometimes with zoning, we don't get that. People of lower income don't get that option. So they're forced to live in a certain area because they can't pay for housing because of certain zoning restrictions in certain areas.
I honestly think that there need to be less regulations with a lot of things, because a lot of the regulations that are in the zoning codes are creating issues that really keep a lot of people out, especially people who demographically have been excluded in the past. It becomes a problem when there's really restrictive zoning codes that, for example, make you have, say, 5 acres of land, which requires you to have a lot of money. And it really just keeps towns very exclusive.
I didn't actually know very much about zoning before starting this project, and I think that when you don't know a lot about zoning, it's easy to think, oh, I like large lot sizes are nice because they look pretty, and to just have your view on zoning be whatever's aesthetically pleasing is best. But once you realize how it actually contributes to the housing shortage and the problems with specific requirements, it opens your eyes to how things need to be changed and what requirements impact housing.
I didn't know much about zoning before. I don't think my views have changed necessarily. I think they've become more informed. So from what I had heard about zoning before, about the problems it can cause with affordable housing, um, I really just went deeper into the issue and saw how much more of an issue it can be. But that being said, I also learned some of the good things about zoning. I think probably one that I can identify with is keeping some land for conservation, because we don't want to destroy all this, the nature around us as well, because that has value.
So I think a lot of people aren't aware of zoning and also what zoning affects, but zoning has economic, environmental, and also affects equity too. So I think if people want to make change, especially in their own communities, it's important to learn like your own zoning and participate in town meetings to make change.
So zoning's almost entirely controlled at the local level by town and city zoning boards, and those boards and the people who have a say on zoning are almost exclusively homeowners. The problem is that the rest of us, young people, renters, are impacted by the zoning ordinance and don't have a say in it. I think that if young people and non-traditional homeowners educate themselves on zoning and work to change their zoning, that they can do good things that that homeowners might not be interested in.
A lot of the people who are on the housing boards or planning boards and zoning boards in their towns they have a lot of antiquated views about who should live in their communities. And you can see that in the ordinances because a lot of them were written in early 70s maybe, when the housing was booming. And to combat that, they made zoning so widespread. I think if we had a lot more young people in zoning and planning boards, you'd see a lot of change.
So I wasn't really reading many of the codes. I was more collecting data from the towns, collecting the maps that they had. The only thing that really varied from town to town was how willing they were to share that information. It was really frustrating when I would get in contact with a town. They would have a whole town meeting, and after that town meeting, they would decide not to share that zoning map with me, which just, why are you hiding it when that obviously is something that needs to be public information for developers to know, for the town to develop as a town. People need to know what the zoning regulations are. So it was just frustrating to see that.